Welcome to the DevLaunch podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories of the tech industry's rising stars. The allure of retirement is the focus of many a daydream, working hard your entire life, saving money away, and finally unplugging from the rat race to enjoy a permanent vacation. Our guest today is bucking that trend. While others coast in their 60s, Jonathan Roth chose to launch a software automation business. In this episode, we'll discover that work is not just about making money, it's also about enjoying the limited time we have on this planet. Well, John, I really appreciate you hopping on the show today. I think one thing that I've really enjoyed in our last time that we had a chance to chat is just getting to know you have such a wealth of experience, right? Like I put you in the category of software veteran titan, because
I noticed that.
Yeah, well, because you've got not just like the last couple years, you have your whole career where you can look back and you can point from experience what you saw, not only with specific businesses but also economic trends, right? And so all the more reason I was like super stoked to have you on the show. And, the tail end of the 80s was your first foray into the tech world, just for everybody who's listening. So you've been doing this for a while.
Yes, I have.
Would you mind sharing?
35 years.
35 years, yeah. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your experience, specifically working in the small and family-owned tech companies throughout your career?
Sure. So I did start in this industry in a small family-owned business. They were a Kodak broker, as they were called back in the day, and primarily selling Kodak hardware. And everything, when I say Kodak hardware, I'm referring to microfilm hardware, because that was the medium of choice back in the 80s for any kind of document storage or any kind of archival storage was microfilm, and digital storage wasn't an option back in those days. But working for a small family-owned business has its advantages and its disadvantages. Advantages are certainly that you don't have the same pressures and restrictions that a large company can put on a salesperson. Sometimes extraordinary pressures that are even sometimes unachievable. Where a smaller family-owned business or just a smaller business has some more flexibility in that regard and doesn't necessarily put the pressure, because there's better communication, there's more understanding, it's more of a team effort, so that they really understand that you're working hard towards a goal, but it may take you a little longer to get there. So, those quarterly numbers and annual numbers aren't so critical. And then the disadvantages certainly are that you don't have the same amount of resources available to you. You don't have the huge engine behind you from a marketing perspective, and you don't also have the big name, right? You don't have the big software companies or big hardware companies that have the name that open doors and get you inside. So it's a little bit of a challenge to find those opportunities. Although if you partner with the right companies, sometimes when you do the right thing, you get a lot of those opportunities because they know that what you're capable of doing. And that was certainly the case for us when I started in the industry. We were a Kodak broker, as I mentioned, and we had an exclusive territory, and we just killed it for them. So they loved giving us business, and I think they're actually today still a partner-driven organization as a result.
Interesting. So that would be one example of where, even though you might not have a huge marketing budget, you guys were still able to make a significant foray into the tech industry by being essentially a channel partner for a bigger, I guess, Kodak, the microphone technology.
Yeah. So, and we were, if you partnered with, if we go back in time, a lot of companies were very partner driven back in the day. So, they didn't sell direct necessarily, and they needed the partners. So they stood right behind you. And as a small business, with partnering with those large companies and having their name and their support, got you into those accounts. It was then up to you to keep those accounts and maintain those accounts. But it did help from a marketing perspective. Some of those companies have changed. A lot of changes happen over the years, and some of them now have direct sales forces, and that, of course, changes the game somewhat and what you have to do and what your limitations are. But yeah, no, there's no doubt that partnering with the right companies that are partner driven can certainly help open doors and help provide opportunities for sales.
So in your experience then working through the tech industry, were you largely on like the business development kind of sales side of the house, or were you also in, I guess, like fulfillment, or even the software development itself?
So, as a small company, you wear many hats, even if you're a salesperson for a small company. And from my perspective, it wasn't just the sale, right? It was what happened after the sale,
Hmm.
because I've seen it happen time and time again where a salesperson has a heavy quota, they make the sale, they hand it off to someone, and they move on. They don't follow up, they don't stay in touch, and they lose that relationship. And that relationship is huge. And you can leverage that relationship for many things over the years. So for me, it was always important to make that sale and then build on that and make sure that the implementation went well. If there was software involved, that the installation and configuration, everything went well, and that you delivered on what you promised, so that then you had a customer potentially for life. And as long as you service that customer appropriately, then that's your customer for life. So me as a salesperson, it wasn't all about making that big sale. I did that, but it was more about building that relationship and maintaining those relationships. And that's why I had customers for 35 years.
Hmm. Oh, wow. Yeah. And building those relationships, did you find yourself building those relationships in a particular industry, or was it like across the board and a bunch of different types of companies? Like, how did you go about making those types of connections?
So initially, early days, as a Kodak broker, and we were exclusively selling Kodak microfilm equipment. There was others. Minolta had some equipment, Canon had some equipment, but Kodak was the name and the best name out there. And because we were a broker, we had an exclusive territory with them. So, we could basically, with very little effort, maintain that territory. As long as we did our job, we had a very successful territory and a lot of business to pull from. So, it wasn't. I kind of lost my train of thought. What was the question again? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, just kind of curious, like how you made those connections, and did you find that they were you were working with companies from all different types of industries, or was it
Oh,
pretty
right,
pretty
right.
kind of focused?
Yes. So as where I was going with that was actually that it was because it was microfilm based. There weren't a whole lot of companies spending money on archiving their documents to microfilm.
Hmm.
It was primarily government was very big
Hmm.
because they had a lot of requirements for maintaining documents a long time. But then it was really those applications where they had by regulations, they had to keep documents and store them appropriately, and they had to be accessible. So it was typically the larger companies that were microfilming and capturing documents to microfilm. And so we were specific to those larger companies, and they weren't financial. A lot of them were manufacturing, retail, companies like Kmart that aren't around
Interesting.
anymore.
Hmm.
But no, because document storage, and then on to document automation, and even today to data automation. It's the type of thing that any company can benefit from.
Hmm.
I mean, back in the day, it was companies that generated a lot of paper. They had a lot of records that they had to store. I'm in New Jersey, but I worked in the New York metropolitan area for a long time, and property is at a premium, and the cost of storing paper, and then of course finding that paper, misfiles, and all those kind of things is what drove it. So
Hmm.
it was primarily large companies that just generated a whole lot of paper and needed to store it and access it. Nowadays, automation can be across the board. It doesn't really matter. Even the smaller companies can take advantage of some automation and save time, become more efficient, become just offer better customer service.
Hmm.
So and it's kind of changed over the years to the point where, from a document and data automation perspective, it really goes across all markets.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. And while you were in the, like you talked about earlier, you wore multiple hats because being in a small business, you don't really have the luxury of just doing like the one thing. You do a lot, and your
Mhm.
hands are in a lot of different things. So, one thing I'm curious about is what were some of the coding languages that you'd primarily worked within throughout your career, and like as you progressed, did you see those languages? Did you like the languages that you were working within? Did you like actively or proactively seek those out? Or was it more like you just had to learn them because that's just the language that was, given to you, whether through Kodak or through other partners? Um,
It's always been primarily, I think, industry driven.
okay.
I think initially, if I think back, some of the software products had their own coding language that was kind of almost .NET based, but it was slightly different. And so you had to code within their language. And then they kind of opened it up to .NET where it was a little more open. But then, the C sharp and then, onto Java. And today, actually, what I'm seeing is a lot more coding in Python. So there's, and I think that there's probably, Java was probably the most predominant over the years. And Java seemed to have the strongest adoption rate and also maybe uh, the strongest platform for critical development, critical application development. That is my perspective from a salesperson slash business owner that doesn't necessarily code, but works with developers all the time.
Hmm.
And yeah, I know that from an data automation perspective, my guys are now coding in Python quite a bit. But yet we still do a lot of Java and even some .NET still.
Hmm. Interesting. I mean, Python makes a ton of sense, especially when you're talking about business process automation. Because I know, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, but I know for Roth Automations, you guys do a lot of that, helping people with
Mm-hmm.
business process automations.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I've heard Python. I've also heard, and this is more so like building out specific applications, but Ruby on Rails. Like, I don't know if you work closely with that or have a lot of experience with Ruby on Rails.
None whatsoever.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, and again, I'm not necessarily a developer, and I'm kind of one of those guys because of what I said earlier, and the fact that I make the sale and I don't just hand it over to somebody. I'm
Hmm.
very, very active in the delivery process,
Hmm.
the implementation. And I do that because I want to make sure that the customer's happy, that they're getting what we agreed to provide and deliver, and I want to just make sure that everything goes well. So as a result, I've learned a lot of the technical aspects, and I
Hmm.
do get involved with some of the coding, but I don't actually code. So and I don't. I've never heard that particular language,
Hmm.
and I don't believe my guys are using it in
Yeah.
any way.
Which I mean, that just goes to show you though that like you can be an expert in a field, especially in the software development world, and either have just a little bit of an awareness of what the language is, but have no awareness of like how you would even code in that framework, or yeah, you maybe even not even come across that, especially for some of the newer languages. Like if Python sounds like it's been a helpful language and framework for the automation work. Why learn a new language?
So I think that maybe just to make sure that we're on the same page, we are not necessarily a software development company. So we don't develop applications from scratch and then put them out on the market. The software development that we do, the coding that we do, is around an implementation of an automation solution, whether it's document automation or data automation. And it seems to be more predominant in the data automation world because in the document automation world in IDP, the vendors are working towards a low code, no code environment, and the citizen developer, as they say, so that trying to make it easier to implement, smaller projects, lower cost, those kind of things. And they're doing a good job with that. And although my guys like it when they don't have that and they actually get to code things, and that's more predominant today in the data automation world because yeah, there's some vendors out there that are trying to make everything a nice GUI and drag and click, whatever. But at the end of the day, it really to make it work properly and give you the most flexibility in what you're trying to deliver in that process, my team seems to like the platforms allow you to code. But that's the kind of coding that we're doing is saying, we look at a business process and it could be very complex. And with the advent of RPA that kind of exploded about 5 years ago, it's been around for many, many more years than that, but it exploded about 5 years ago. And everybody, thought, oh, it can automate everything. And yeah, it can if if you know how to code, because drag and drop and no code, low code platforms can only go so far, can only automate certain parts of a business process. But when you get into the real complexities and some of the real intricacies of a business process, you have to be able to code around that. At least that's what we find.
So, John, you have had the privilege, I mentioned this earlier, but you have the privilege of something that many of my colleagues in their 20s and 30s don't necessarily have, which is perspective. So you've worked through things like the dot-com crash, the 2008 crash, and now also the pandemic. Are there any lessons that you've gathered from those times that are helping you weather the storm today?
So you forgot Y2K.
Oh, that's right.
That was actually one of the craziest. So the whole world was going to stop when we turned to the January 1st, 2000. Yeah, so I think what I've learned is just not to panic, and that if you just keep doing the right thing, and I mean it's a difficult time for everybody. The dot-com crash, certainly the crash the markets in 2008, and then the pandemic. I mean the pandemic. So one of the great things about what I do, although I'm very much a face-to-face kind of person, and that's always been my success. So I don't necessarily like the change that's almost become a permanent change where we do this and we sit in front of a computer, and although it's face-to-face and I can see you and I like that. But I've been on the road my whole entire career, and since the pandemic, I've been in the office. And yeah, that's a little tough for me. There's no question. But, all of those things, at the end of the day, business survives. People, we survive. We get through those hard times. And yes, there could be hard times. And sometimes you got to tighten your belt. Sometimes you have to just, make some very difficult decisions. But if your business is strong and you have done the right thing by your clients, even if your clients back off a little bit for financial reasons, thinking, fear out of a recession, or during a pandemic, you can't go on site, everybody leaves and no one knows what's going on. As long as you continue to do the right thing by your customer and you have that strong business, like I said, you might have to make some difficult decisions, but you just have to be strong. It's very easy to let the fear overwhelm you and kind of throw in the towel and say, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And but you just keep doing what you do and working hard at it. And I've survived all of those very successfully by just being the good person, doing the right thing.
I mean, yeah, it sounds too simple to be true, but it is, which is, especially with all of the rumors of recession that we had heard all through 2022 and 2023, there was arguably some challenges that I've heard from a lot of other people I've talked to in their business, where they found that clients would just kind of maybe hold a little tighter to their coin purse than they had even previously. And that can be very disorienting the very first time you experience it. But like you've shared, you've been through also the Y2K and all these other, crises or economic downturns. And what you realize through it all is that just keep swimming, just keep doing your thing.
Yeah. And, I can certainly understand that feeling and relate to it. And because I had customers that either, whether it was the pandemic or fear of recession, that tightened their belt and kind of, as you said, held back on expenses. And we've actually lost a couple of deals through those years because of that. And to the point where you're onboarded to a customer, you're just about to receive a PO on the last day of the quarter, and their financial leadership says, we're freezing everything. We're not spending anything until we know what's going to happen in the market for us. So yeah, that happens. And and there's definitely fear and consternation as a result. But what I would say is that, at least for my industry, for what we do, we actually save the company money. We make their process more efficient. And we never or ever suggest that they can replace headcount with it. But what they can do is they don't have to hire more people. If their business grows, if their process becomes more efficient, they can then repurpose people from menial tasks potentially to more knowledgeable tasks and more valuable tasks. So companies, even through recession, through downturns, through pandemic, even pandemic, we can deliver remotely. We don't have to be on site. And at the end of the day, the process that we deliver makes their business more efficient and helps them save money and time. So this industry is almost recession proof in some ways as a result. Where if I'm manufacturing some goods and I sell to the financial industry and they go through a crisis, or the real estate industry like 2008, and I'm like doing that kind of business, then yes, there were tons of people in different markets that lost their jobs, had all kinds of issues. But this particular industry, luckily and thankfully, and that I stumbled into 35 years ago, has proven to be somewhat, recession proof.
You'd said something. I want to circle back to it. You had said that when you are speaking with your prospective clients, you never want to frame it as the automation can reduce headcount. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Well, because I'm not, I feel that I'm an empathetic person, and I've had employees with me for years, and the reason why is because I value those employees, and I think I certainly don't want to be the reason why somebody loses their job. I would never ever suggest that if we put this solution in, you can reduce your headcount by 50%, and then save all this money. That's very possible. The technology we use can do that, but I don't want anybody to lose their. What I say is that you don't have to have someone sitting there keying invoices into your ERP system. They can do other things. You can repurpose them where maybe you need help in some other areas and you don't have to go hire people. So I'm all about repurposing people if we happen to provide efficiencies that require fewer people in that process. I'm all about repurposing them. I don't want to be the person to have someone lose their job.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's incredibly empathetic. And I think it speaks to a deeper character. And it's interesting. Now you mentioned that, I think something that I've appreciated as I get to know more people who own, dev agencies, whether they be automation people or people who are building custom applications, wherever they are on the spectrum, I think for the most part, a lot of them do want to do right by the people who are going to use the technology. And it's not about, let's just slash costs at all costs. And I think that's really
there
important.
There are companies and CEOs that do that, right? That's what they're all about. They have no qualms about reducing their force. They're at given times to cut their expenses and improve their bottom line. And trust me, there have been times when, through difficult times where I could have reduced my headcount. And I found ways to keep everybody employed and keep everybody, with the team. And to me, if you can do that, that's the right way to go. Do I want to make a living? Yes. Do I want to make as much money as I can? Yes. I think everybody does. But do I want to make money at the expense of other people? No. That's not my goal at all, and will never be.
That's really good. I love that. And then on the flip side, was what you were saying is, the way to really think about automations is it will help you to grow in a way that doesn't require additional headcount.
Yeah, and businesses always, if they don't have a plan for growth, then what's their plan? What's the alternative, right? You just stay where you are and hope that nobody comes in and does a better job and displaces you. I mean, you have to embrace technology. You have to embrace any kind of changes in your market, and you have to plan for growth because company that isn't growing is dying slowly, in my opinion. So, yeah. So what we do is we say, yeah, we can help you grow and by making your processes more efficient and requiring less people to do this job or that job. We're doing some data automation in the healthcare industry where they are using people and hiring people to do menial tasks of data entry and crazy things like that. And we say, no, you don't need to hire those 10 people. You can use this technology and it can do the work of those 10 people. And then you can continue to grow as you are with the people that you have. So, companies, because what happens very often is companies will hire those 10 people, their business will change and they fire those 10 people. I actually spoke to a customer not that long ago they're going through some incredible growth, and they throw a whole bunch of people at it, and they hire crazy number of people on a weekly basis, and then they deploy technology and they fire those people. So they just use them temporarily as they grow. To me, that's just wrong. Instead of hiring those people and throwing at them, take a look at technology, embrace technology, because you wouldn't need to play with those people's lives the way you are. And that's not, to me, that's just not right.
I mean, that's profound. And I think, if I can go out on a limb and say this, I think we need more business owners who think that way, to be totally honest. I don't think, I think in some other countries, definitely European countries, there are like very strict labor laws that effectively had to come about because people don't think that way, or they inherently think more self-centered, and they're not considering the impact that it's having on these other people. And so I think kudos to you for leading the way and leading the charge in that way.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's just the way I feel. Yeah, I'm not, I obviously, CEO of JP Morgan is driven by, their stock price and dividends and things like that. And at the end of the day, when you have 80,000 employees and you have to let 5,000 go and it's part of your business, to me, that's still not acceptable. But it exists today, and it is a reality. And I do, if I was the CEO of that business, I'd be asking questions like, why do we need to do this, and why are we doing this? Again, I mean, luckily, and knock on wood, in my 35-year career, I've been employed. I've never had to, go on unemployment or go searching for a job and be unemployed for any period of time. But I know people that have, and I know people that have through the pandemic and through the all the different things that affect the market. And it's not a good thing. And if you have family and kids, it can be extremely stressful, and it's just not right. I mean, it used to be, I think back, there was a gentleman, customer of mine for many, many years, at a very, very large insurance company, and they forced him to retire because he was like, I don't know, 75 years old. He'd been with the company for 55 years. But that company never, in all the years I worked with him, never fired anybody. It's an insurance company that just, once you were hired there, you had a job for life pretty much. Things change in the market, unfortunately, but to me, that was incredibly impressive. And it made it just, for me, I was very attracted to doing business with that company. And I worked with the same people. They're my customer, 25 years, worked with the same people for 25 years. Just an unbelievable relationship. So, there's some benefit also, in my opinion, in consistency and having the same people driving your business. Obviously, if someone isn't doing the job, you have to do something and make a correction. But if they're doing a good job and your company is growing and you have a really solid team, that's the team that I want to be with. That's the team. That's what we have here. I mean, our team has been together for a very long time. And they're very good.
Well, and speaking of that, the team being together for a very long time, I know we talked about it at a very high level, but I'd love to know maybe a little bit more specifics. The point at which Roth Automations officially kind of came about. How many years ago was that?
So That's a loaded question. It,
Can of worms opened.
yeah. So this is the second business I started. I had a couple of partners in my first business, and for a bunch of reasons, it was time for me to leave in October of 2020. So I didn't know actually at the time I was 62 years old, and I thought to myself, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that it was time for me to leave. So I thought about going and looking for a job. I wasn't ready to retire. I'm not the type of person to retire. I have hobbies and there are things that I like to do, but I need to be busy and I need to be challenged. And I also, I'm a firm believer that if you're not moving and you're not learning, then you're dying, right? You've got to keep moving and you've got to keep learning. You got to keep your brain working. So retirement's just not for me. And I don't know if I'm going to retire anytime soon. That being said, it was a very difficult decision. I had a couple of good people around me that supported me and said, John, go do this. Um, we'll make this work. And here we are 3.5 years later. So I was also very successful in bringing the team I'd worked with for years over. So I'm working with with the same a group of developers I've worked with for years, and I've got great support. But at the same time, 65, there's a lot of challenges with starting a business and a lot of challenges with maintaining a business. And you have to have energy and you have to have, I mean, my kids are grown at this point, they're in their 20s. So I have some time and I believe I have the energy. I've stayed active my whole life and I'm not ready to settle down and stop working. So yeah, I started this about 3.5 years ago and I'm loving it. It's very exciting.
Well, I gotta say also, it probably helps having a dog too.
Having a dog?
Yeah. Well, you got a dog, don't you?
I love my dog. So yeah, I must have told you about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at 100%, there's I've had a dog my whole entire life. Well,
Mm.
that's not true. I moved to Jersey. I grew up in Lower East Side of Manhattan and moved to Jersey in fourth grade, and we got a dog. And I've had a
Mm.
dog pretty much in my life ever since. A dog is a great companion. They're loving, and it's like just unlimited love and affection.
Mm.
And through a pandemic where you're isolated, and then through starting a business where you have to work through all kinds of difficulties and challenges, and sometimes very much on your own. You have to make hard decisions. And yeah, that having that love and affection of a companion like that to me is worth a ton of money. It's just wonderful.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah.
One friend of mine, her dog is the director of security for her company. So make sure
My
to.
dog could not be the director of security. He would have to lick somebody to death. So he's a lover. He's 85 pounds. He's a big guy, but he's just the sweetest dog and a lover. And he just wants love and affection. That's all he wants.
I love
So
that.
and the greeting that you get when you come home is unbelievable.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, it definitely changes
I
the
get a
game. But
good greeting from my wife too, just so you know. Just
okay,
saying.
fair enough. But you're
She's pretty
surrounded.
amazing. I've got an amazing wife.
And you're surrounded by, I would say, just a lot of additional energy. I mean, you were telling me this even before our interview, that something that's driving, that is helpful for you in continuing to work even into what other people would call retirement years, is like you're surrounded by kind of that youthful energy and spirit. I mean, you yourself already are that, but it's also like you've surrounded yourself too. I mean, your wife's a little bit younger. You've got a dog. Your kids are still, they're in their 20s, but it's like everybody's doing stuff.
Yeah, it's very exciting. My house is very busy. My kids are both in their 20s, mid 20s. Both are on their way and building their own careers, and it's very exciting being a part of that. And it's a lot of activity, and we get together for dinner every night. And actually, my daughter's boyfriend, very steady boyfriend, is a young man who's a New York City police officer. Moved in a few months ago to to help save some money and make his life a little easier. He's a great young man. So we have five of us in the house and the dog. So it's a busy household, and the best part of it is coming home at night and having everybody around and having dinner together and talking about it everybody's day. It's pretty special.
So, John, you have had the chance now to work with some pretty incredible companies through Roth Automation. Would you mind telling us a little bit about some things that you've been really excited to be working on recently?
So I have, because of the years in the industry, I implemented this technology called OCR. It stands for Optical Character Recognition. It's basically lifting data from documents, extracting the data from relevant data, actionable data, data that's needed for a company to do business, for their process to function. Historically, that data would be keyed by people. And actually, when I started in the industry, OCR was just starting to come out, mostly in healthcare for claim forms, health claim forms, what they called HCFA 1500s, UBs, UB92s back in the day. And then insurance companies would have a bank of people just sitting there keying data off of these forms. And that's when OCR first started to, in my opinion, I think that was basically one of the first applications, if not the first applications, that lended itself or drove OCR into existence. But it was very, very structured at the time. So my first implementation was at a company called Dean Witter, which is no longer out there. They were an investment firm years ago. And it was a hardware-based, software-based OCR system for their structured forms only. So I followed the transition of the technology from structured forms to semi-structured forms to unstructured forms, which have been a challenge for OCR because there's no labeling, there's no structure. How do you find the data? You have to have some very, very talented developers who know how to code to look at that document and where the data is and all the context around it to code appropriately to find it. Very, very challenging in the day. Fast forward to today, and unstructured documents are becoming more more appropriate for OCR because of the advent of AI and mostly AI, because AI now can read that entire document and understand it and find data elements. So I think there's still work to be done, but it's an exciting time. If you've been with OCR as long as I have, and not just, I mean, there was a lot of just document capture, archival capture, but the OCR has always been the most challenging and the most exciting, and it still is today because it just continues to improve, and the technology is moving at such an incredible rate that now completely unstructured forms are the possibility of lifting data appropriately from them is becoming real, and it's exciting.
Well, and it's interesting that you're saying that. One thing that was making me think about is a lot of times we think AI and we think about this as like a distinct, technology. It's over here and it's doing something discrete. But like even just what you just shared right there is it's like, no, even in this way, AI is helping to mobilize an existing technology or like beef it up a bit. So something like OCR technology, where it was previously very limited, now with the advent of AI and the integration of AI into OCR technology, we're seeing much more effective use of the OCR technology.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Tone. AI is a lot of things. It can do a lot of things. It can do all kinds of predictions for your business, and can from image. I mean, there's just so much AI can do. But from a document intelligence perspective, it still today uses OCR technology. But then once you have all that data, it's the AI that lays on top of that starts to find it all for you. So back in the day, we'd have to take 1,000 forms, 1,000 samples of one form type, feed it into the system, tell it what it is, so it learn what it is, and then show it the data that we want from it. And we'd have to zone for that data, say this is what we're looking, this is one, or we'd have to create a knowledge base of locators and labels to identify the data and find it. AI is changing that in a way that it takes the results from the OCR and it lays it on top. and it can then find all that data for you. It can identify all the key value pairs. It can identify all the key elements of a contract. It can summarize things. So yeah, and it's going at an incredible pace at this point. So it's a result of years of training models of this is what an invoice looks like. Let's feed it millions of invoices and tell it this is the type of data we're looking for. So now it says, okay, I see this as an invoice. I can see all the data. I think this is the data that you want from it. So it's required a lot of time and training and investment. But it's still, I think there's still work to be done. But from a document intelligence perspective, it seems to be changing the game where now we can get to the result faster. There's less time for implementation. It's easier. We need less samples. There's so many advantages to it. That's really exciting at this time. It's the most exciting, I think. And I would say that even though RPA exploded, I think RPA also opens a lot of different opportunities because, yes, there's a lot of data locked in documents and there's a lot of information that you need for your business process. But the transactional stuff that happens behind the scenes that requires somebody to key something or somebody to accept something or somebody to move a piece of data and just sit there and do that all day long. And now you have technology that can do that. And like I said, the technology has been out there for probably 20 years. I have a friend in the industry who started a company and did RPA back 20 years ago. It just exploded and became very predominant about 5 years ago. And that's kind of when I was introduced to it because I was in the document automation business for years and not necessarily data automation. And it was that particular friend that actually explained it to me in a way that I understood it. I'm like, okay, there's some real advantage to automation there, and there's a lot that we can do to help our customers with RPA. So RPA and AI are the two things that have impacted my business in the last several years and are exciting.
So, I mean, maybe two follow-up questions there. One is just practically, when we're talking about AI, are there any unique tools or things that you've come across recently that you're like, this is super helpful, or this complements nicely to our existing technology offers? Any discrete products that you're thinking of?
There's several. All the big players have some, intelligent document identification extraction technologies. Amazon has, Google, Microsoft, they all have it. And some of the negatives are that it's up in the cloud, and it's basically crowdsourcing. It's you're helping to train the model, sending your documents up there. They're doing things to allow you to maybe isolate your own model at some point and fine tune it. But from my perspective, a lot of the financial insurance organizations that we've worked with historically are hesitant to send their documents up to the cloud, and we're looking very seriously at applying AI technology behind their firewall that would be their engine and their model specifically. So we can fine tune it to their documents and to their data, and it will learn and it will grow, but it'll be behind their firewall so that the documents don't go necessarily up to the cloud.
Well, and that was the follow-up question is like, knowing that many of your specialty is, whether working with governmental agencies or medical type companies, both of them are highly regulated and very conscious of data privacy. So, obviously the follow-up question there is like, in what ways are you hesitant to employ AI, or what ways are your clients, kind of resistant to AI? And it sounds like a little bit of what you just said.
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about medical information, it's highly regulated, and for that reason, the environments need to be extremely secure, and opening it up to send your documents to the cloud is not necessarily an option. It creates vulnerability and potential vulnerability. So when we work from a data automation perspective, the data never leaves their environment. Everything happens behind their firewall. There is some communication through a port for us to execute, and there's basically up in the cloud, there's a controller that says, time to execute this robot. But that's the only type of transaction or communication transmission. There's no, the customer's data never leaves their environment, never leaves, is always behind their firewall. And similarly, from a document perspective, we actually do some hosting, and we host it in a very secure environment, and it's only VPN connections in and out, and everything is highly regulated. We've been part of high trust certifications and so on. So yeah, it's very important, and we're being very cautious, and we're doing our due diligence to make sure that everything is protected, secure, and their information is not exposed in any way.
I love that. Wow. It's so fascinating. I mean, we can talk about AI, and depending on the ways in which the company is, where the needs are, is going to very much dictate, what you're using AI for, right? So like one of our previous guests, he said AI they were using to kind of help model for an application he was building, model truck routes, right? So like that would be one application. And then what you're talking about is just very practically like making OCR technology much better, so that it can do more things, or it can be more capable of reading all types of different documents. So I think it's cool to hear that, because I think we can see here that it really depends on, I guess, the person who's in the driver's seat, and is guiding and directing the clients to find the most meaningful application of AI in their business.
100%. And more important, I think, one of the lessons I learned early on in life, and I have my father to thank, was to listen to my customers. And I think that's really important, because at the end of the day, if you're not listening to your customer and you're doing what you believe is right, that you could be making a mistake. And so you have to listen to your customers and tell stories and things. So if you, and they're not always the best listeners. And my dad used to say to me, you have two ears and one mouth. And what that meant was listen twice and say nothing. The smartest person in the room is the person that isn't talking, right? Everybody's wondering when they say something that's probably of value, right? It's something of value. So I believe that I listen to my customers. I listen to their concerns. I listen, their desires for their business and what they envision. And then we talk about what the solution might look like. So it's very important in this day that you're very much in touch with your customer and understand their business and the restrictions and values of their business.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's universal advice, but it's good to hear it in this context for sure. Yeah. John, I'd love for you to take a moment, if you would, to consider kind of two main audiences I think we try to reach with this podcast. And the first one would be, that senior software developer, somebody who's risen up the ranks in corporate America, who's eyeing towards eventually starting their own thing, whether that's freelancing or starting their own dev agency, or maybe even a SaaS product. So that would be one person. Another person would be somebody who's recently started their own business, software business, within the last year or so. What words of wisdom could you give to either of those or both of those audiences?
Wow. So first of all, I would say that you need to do all your due diligence up front to make sure that you're starting a business that has relevance, that you believe, have a good, solid business plan. But then more importantly, I think, from my perspective, and this has been, how I've lived my life, and that is that you have to do the right thing, that it isn't about you, it's about them. So, too many people, I've seen it with salespeople my whole entire life. It's all about their numbers, their quota, they're making their money. At the end of the day, it's not about that. It's about the customer. And one of the mistakes I've seen them make over the years is that they're so driven by their quotas and the revenue that they don't take the time to listen or build that relationship with their customer. So me personally, it's all about building that relationship, learning and understanding the customer and their business, and then just doing the right thing. So making sure that at the end of the day, your decisions are driven by what's best for your customer, not what's best for you. And even though that sounds like a cliche or something that everybody should know, that's not the case. They don't necessarily know that, and for that reason, and I can just reference salespeople I've hired in the past where they were successful working for large software companies, and they'd come to me, and I don't have 50, 100 customers to say, here, go manage these customers. They'd have come here and build their own base. But I would think that they would have some customers in their book to go to and talk with and potentially get some business from. And I found that they didn't, because they were so highly driven by the revenue and the quotas that they didn't build that relationship, and they weren't able to go back to that customer. The customer's like, well, we're still working with your other company. Well, I was the one that brought you to that company. Yeah, but they're doing a great job for me. Where'd you go? So you need to, that's why I also, stay very much involved with my customers. I can tell you that if I don't hear from a customer in a certain period of time, I'm calling them and I'm saying, hey, what's going on? I would go to visit my customer even if I had no reason to go visit them, because you need to maintain and build that relationship. They need to know that you are there for them, that you care about their business, that you're interested in their success. And if you do all those things, I think you'll be fine.
Well, I mean, it's like you said, it seems like a cliche, but a lot of people still don't think that way. A lot of people don't embrace that. So I think this is great words of wisdom. And just restating what I'm hearing you say, it's not about me, it's about them.
It's about your customer.
And putting the focus correctly on them. I love that. John, I'm going to guess that people are going to listen to this interview and they're going to think to themselves, I'd really like to grab coffee, virtual coffee with John. Or maybe they just want to keep up to date with everything that's going on with you guys at Roth Automation. What would be the best way for people to either get in contact with you or just follow what's going on for you with Roth Automation?
So I'm pretty active, fairly active, I should say, on LinkedIn. I've got quite a number of connections, and I post at least weekly. And sometimes I post, although I've been a little remiss, we've been busy. I haven't posted necessarily in the industry, but I do post every Friday, some thoughts of mine. But so LinkedIn is always a good place to find me. RothAutomation.com is our website, and there's information up there, and there's ways to reach me there. But I think other than giving out my phone number, jroth@rothautomation.com. I mean, that's me, and I'm always available, and I love talking to people, and I'm always available for a conversation or a cup of coffee. So there's multiple ways to get me.
I love it. Well, and I would highly encourage anybody who's listening to take them up on that offer, because John and I had a wonderful chat before we had this conversation, and we've had a wonderful chat today. So, John, I really appreciate you taking the time, sharing a little bit of your perspective. It was very insightful and enlightening for me, so I appreciate that.
Well, it's my pleasure, Tony. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great conversation.
And thank you to our listeners. If you found value out of our podcast today, please share it with your friends and subscribe for future episodes. Also, don't forget to leave us a review, because it helps other people find us and hear inspiring stories like the one we heard today. If you are the founder of a software development agency, or you know somebody who is, and you'd like to share something exciting that you're up to with our audience, drop me a line at tony@equip.com. That's ACCQUIP.com.